surface dweller. You have entered a place largely untouched by mankind.
Hello, my name is Devin, and you are watching my build guide series for Path of Exile. Today, we will be looking at my take on a Lightning Conduit Elementalist. If you're looking to try an off-meta brand build that's simple and buttery smooth to play, then this is the build for you. It combines the crazy effective shock spread of Stormbrand with the powerhouse nuking of Lightning Conduit. It also happens to be pretty effective at bossing, which you'll see in this video. I got my first ever clears of Maven, Uber Elder, and Sirus, all with this build, and from an hours played perspective, I am a complete noob. Which is literally the only class I've played. Alright, so let's talk Lightning Conduit. Conduit is a very unique skill. It was just added in patch 3.19, known as the Forgotten League, or Calandra League for us that played it. What makes Conduit unique is it only does damage once you've actually shocked your target. It can't apply shock, and it consumes the shock upon landing. So, because it doesn't apply shock, if you just cast it, it means it does nothing, right? In isolation, it doesn't damage your enemies. So unless you can apply shock and then reapply shock and then reapply shock again, essentially your hits are going to whiff and it will look like you're a newly minted ninja player who can't even get a mudra right. In a nutshell, if no shock has been applied to your target, you're simply going to be waving your arms looking like an idiot. But have no fear. We can solve this shock puzzle with a few different abilities, but we're going to focus on Stormbrand. If you're unfamiliar with brand skills, you're in luck. I'm about to do a quick overview. If you're an expert in the art of the brand, go ahead and skip forward, maybe 2 minutes. Okay, let's talk brands. So, brand skills such as Armageddon, Wintertide, and Stormbrand all place a small icon on the ground that attaches to an enemy when they get close. The brand starts ticking, activating, and doing damage to the target. At the same time, they usually apply some kind of elemental ailment, except for Arcanist Brand, but we're not going to cover Arcanist Brand. Brands also chain very effectively, making them ideal for killing big groups of enemies. You can only have one brand attached to an enemy at a time, but luckily that can be bypassed with an easily accessible notable called Runebinder. This notable lowers the amount of allowed totems while increasing the allowed number of brands on a single target. And since this build doesn't use silly totems, we can ignore the downside. By default, you can have up to 3 brands active at any given time. This can be increased with the passive brand equity, but this build doesn't care about that. 3 storm brands are more than enough to coat an entire screen in electrical goodness. The only other thing you need to know about brands is they do detach from your target after about 5 seconds. So this means with bosses, you do need to continuously apply your brand to the target in order for it to do damage. And for this build, it's essential that we have 2 brands attached to bosses and uniques at all times. Having just one brand will result in a substantial DPS loss. Welcome back, brand experts. We're now moving on to talk about Stormbrand specifically. Okay, so Stormbrand is downright dirty in its ability to chain and shock enemies in big packs of mobs. It activates every half second, dealing damage and having a chance to shock. This actually increases with cast speed increase, so that also impacts its activation speed. On top of that, the skill itself will naturally spread shocking beams to nearby enemies. This means that dropping a single Stormbrand amongst mobs will result in a chain reaction. Behold, as our Stormbrand swarms this pack of mobs until they're dead. This machine gun-like application of shock means we are free to consume that shock via Lightning Conduit fast and as safely as we want. No managing your storm orb placement, no recasting arc like a pleb. Just set and forget those brands while you start blasting at maximum power. Alright, so overall, this build is extremely good at mapping and feels very satisfying once you get the rhythm down. It's a really good league starter for new players, as well as mediocre tryhards like yours truly. Each skill is very intuitive, so you won't need to spend hours reading a handwritten guide just to figure out how to get your crap working. Defensively, it has elemental ailment immunity through Crucible passive trees, your Pantheon, and Tempest Shield. It has very solid armor and evasion, along with 100% spell suppression without breaking the bank. It also has really good life and energy shield leech. This is mainly thanks to a very cheap ring, Barracks Pass, and a nice cluster jewel with Storm Drinker. But if you don't have either of those, you can easily sub in an Energy Leech support gem into your Lightning Conduit setup or snag 1 to 2 passives on the passive tree. Either way, you will need some Energy Leech because of how the build works, so plan on having some. It handles all the standard endgame content, including Witnessed Uber Elder and Maven. You'll see that in this video. I have not tried it with the remaining Uber encounters or the Feared, so if you're going to do that with this build, attempt at your own risk. Where it really thrives, though, is its affordability. Being fairly off-meta, you can easily hit 2 million damage without spending more than 2 to 3 divines. The current build I'm running cost me about 12 divines, most being dumped into my 6-link chest, the cluster jewels, and my Watcher's Eye. Alright, let's talk gems, starting with our main 6-link in the chest, which is for Lightning Conduit. We run 5 different support gems: Added Lightning Damage, Lightning Penetration, Hypothermia, Cruelty, Elemental Focus, and Energy Leech if you feel like it. Currently, I run Cruelty because with an armor and evasion chest, it was much easier to roll a 4 blue, 1 green, 1 red socket 6-link than it was to try to get a 5 blue, 1 green. So feel free to use one or the other, depending upon what you have or what's cheaper. In our gloves, we run a damage support and Stormbrand setup. We have Stormbrand, Hex Touch, Conductivity, and Chain support. This lets us get the maximum amount of umph out of our Stormbrand, lets it chain shock amazingly fast, and then we'll apply a nice conductivity debuff to all enemies, which is a nice big damage boost. In our boots, we're opting for our cast when damage taken setup. It's a very simple setup, it's really nice, and it has good utility and good survivability. So you'll have a level 1 cast when damage taken, a level 7 Frost Bomb, a level 7 Wave of Conviction, and a level 9 Vol Molten Shell. Now, there's a little bit of flexibility here. That Frost Bomb is meant to stop enemy shield and health regen. This is really nice when you have some badly modded Einar beasts. The level 7 Wave Conviction is for lightning exposure. Now, there's other ways to get lightning exposure, so there's a couple other things that you could run here. I like it because it's pretty consistent and allows me to kill things quickly that come up and hit you and are following you closely. So I like it. And then the Vol Molten Shell is just our oh shit button, right? It helps us when things get very spicy. So in our helm, we have our basic aura setup. We have 4 auras. We're running Determination for the flat armor buff, Grace for the flat evasion buff, Defiance Banner for more armor and more evasion, and Tempest Shield. This is what gives us our shock immunity and gives us a little bit of damage. In our wand, we have a Flame Dash, Shield Charge, and Summon Golem utility setup, I guess you could say. This is where we get our movement, how we are fast and zoomy, and then the Summon Lightning Golem is just a nice little damage buff. In our shield, we are running kind of the unique aspect, one of the more unique aspects of this build. We have a nice damage boost setup where we run Divine Blessing, Inspiration, and Wrath. Divine Blessing is an extremely cool skill that allows us to take an aura and turn it into a temporary buff. The downside is that aura now costs a ton of mana, especially at level 20. So this is partially mitigated by Inspiration. That reduces the mana cost of the associated skill by a small amount. So you can expect Wrath to cost about 600 mana by the time your gems are max. But as you probably can see, we have absolutely no mana after reserving 4 skills for our auras. So to get around this, we take Eldritch Battery. This allows us to stack a little bit of Energy Shield in order to make sure we can cast our Divinely Inspired Wrath without problems. Alright, the last thing I wanted to cover in this middling build guide are 3 things. The notable passives for our Crucible weapons that are needed, our Pantheon, and then Flasks. These 3 things will make our build really truly sing and make it really smooth. So let's start with the Pantheon. So our major deity is the Soul of the Brine King. This provides us a much needed freeze immunity as well as a reduced chill. This is essential if you don't want to die to strong boxes. For our minor deity, I start with Soul of Abernath. until you get a particular Crucible passive later. This gives you a 60% reduced ignite as well as immunity to burning ground. This is very nice for mapping and fire-related bosses. So stick with the Soul of Abernath until we get the Crucible passive. Okay, Crucible passives. So there's actually quite a bit you can choose from. For this build, I focus on a particular 4, 2 in your wand and 2 that you want to try to find in your shield. For your wand, first look for a strong spell damage buff on your initial passive. Second, you'll want to look for some combination of power, freeze, and endurance charge passives. Power charges are the least important, so hitting a downside on those is totally fine. Currently, I'm running an increase in charge duration to support the passives in my shield. You could also look for a +1 minimum endurance or frenzy charge with a -1 maximum power charge. This is also very powerful for our build. For your shield passives, keep an eye out for these specific notable ones. 100% ignite avoidance with an increased shock chance. This passive is amazing because it grants us ignite immunity and we can completely ignore the downside. Tempest Shield makes us shock immune. So at this point, if you find this passive, you can kick out your Abernath Minor God for something a bit better. Currently, I would run Shikari because of the excellent poison and chaos damage mitigation. The other notable passive that I'm running is generate a random charge on kill, and charges are reduced by 75%. So obviously we're mitigating that 75% with what is in our wand. On its own, this passive is okay, but once you can mitigate the downside, it's really nice. It's really hard to get charges with this build, and this is a nice, pretty easy and effective way to do it. It really helps with mapping, and you don't sacrifice much at all. And finally, let's talk flasks. We have a 5 flask setup with a health, a quartz flask, granite, silver, and quicksilver. So the quartz flask is for spell suppression, the granite is for extra armor, the silver for onslaught, and the quicksilver for speed. For these flasks, we must have these 3 modifiers. So you have to roll these modifiers if you're going to run endgame. Corrupting blood immunity and bleed immunity, reduced effective curses, and poison immunity. As long as you have those 3, you should be good to go. The poison immunity is a little less important if you have Shikari in your Pantheon, but it's still pretty nice. Once you have those, you can go for any other modifier that helps your build out. So increased evasion, increased armor, increased cast speed, all that stuff is great. So look for those modifiers, but you must have those other 3 if you want to run endgame. And that's the end of my build guide. If you made it this far, thank you. This was my first attempt at a long-form guide video, and any feedback would be much appreciated. Please take a few seconds to like the video if it ended up helping. This will motivate me to make more if people actually use it. So the remainder of the video will be me clearing a few encounters, a witnessed Uber Elder, Maven, and just generally highlighting some of the strengths and overall play patterns of the build. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
resist my entropy. Mortal flesh is so fallible. Grasp your mortality tightly. Feel death's pull. Life is self-brittle. Feel your life train away. Life is so brittle.